I'm going to cancel my Netflix subscription soon, and I just thought I would let everybody know about it because I can never find anything that I want to watch. And this is despite the fact that there are probably 100 different categories of movies and TV shows on Netflix. You open up the app or turn on your TV, and you've got action and adventure, children and family, classic, comedies, documentaries, dramas, and we're just up to D in the alphabet. And then hundreds or thousands of movies and shows in those categories. And then the categories in Netflix get oddly specific too. So you've got feel-good holiday romance. Late night, everyone has gone to bed, but you can't sleep comedies. Super interesting stuff you've never heard of that is far more interesting than the project you're supposed to be working on right now. But the story that we're in right now, Exodus, it fits, I think, right into the drama category. It's an epic drama with twists and turns. And in some spots, it's a horror movie. You may remember last week how the king of Egypt, also called the Pharaoh, he called for all the baby boys, all the baby Hebrew boys to be killed. That's a horror movie. And he commanded 2 Hebrew midwives, Shifra and Puah, to do it. And as we saw, they refused. And so the king told his own people to kill the baby boys. That was last week. He had said, every boy that is born to the Hebrews, you shall throw into the Nile River, but you shall let every girl live. And that's where we pick up today, in this story that is far more interesting than anything Netflix has to offer. And I'll invite you to turn to your bulletins, or if you've got a Bible with you, always a good place to bring your Bible is to our services as we go through Exodus. If you want to look at these verses, we'll go through this story and listen to it together again. Starting in verse 1, a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. Now, we'll see later that the son's name is Moses. And if you've heard this story, you know that. The parents are not named here. They're named elsewhere. They're Amram, the dad, and Jochebed, the mom. Not exactly household names. Their son and their other son and their daughter got all the glory. Maybe we know the name Miriam, who's the oldest. She's probably about 7 or 8 at this time. She's just a kid. And there's another little one already in the house when Moses is born, Aaron, who's about 3. Very lovely family. And Miriam is safe from the king of Egypt's terrible command because she's a girl. In fact, Aaron has survived because 3 years ago, apparently, the king was letting the baby boys live. How generous of you, O king. So here's baby number 3, and mom and dad would be rejoicing, except it's a boy. And they know what the rule is. It means murder. And they're not going to lay a finger on this kid, but the Egyptians might. And so mom hides the baby for 3 months. Look at the second part of verse 2. It says, when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. But you can only hide a baby for so long. They make noise. They emit certain smells, mostly good ones. So then in verse 3, it says, when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. She placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. So she is kind of following the king's directions. His directions were throw the baby boys into the Nile. I doubt she threw him. She's doing it as safely as possible. But what an awful position the king has put these parents in. I mean, this is child abuse. And if you've ever read this passage and thought, as I have at times before diving in, if you've ever thought, what kind of mother would throw her baby into a river? Well, the answer is the kind of mother that didn't have much choice and was trying to save her baby, just trying to do the best she could. So look now at verse 4. The story continues. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. I love that. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. She's just 7 or 8 years old, we think. Most scholars think 7 or 8. And she's awesome. Does mom know that Miriam is watching? Did mom send Miriam? It doesn't say. But imagine how she must be feeling watching her baby brother in this powerful river, this river that gave life and that could destroy. It's unreal. So verse 5, Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying. Of course he was crying. And she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said. We get this flash of mercy from Pharaoh's daughter. It says she felt sorry for him, which is an emotion that her dad, the king, the Pharaoh, seems unwilling to feel. That's right. She knows exactly what is going on. This kid is contraband, but he was crying, it says, and the appropriate response to a crying baby is not to shake them, not to hurt them, not to abandon them, but to nurture them, to comfort them. And so she is thinking all this through, and then verse 7, here's Miriam now, who's been like over here off to the side, and okay, that's my line. That's where I enter this scene. She says in verse 7, shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse this baby for you? I might know some Hebrew women who could help with this baby. She's so clever. 7 or 8 years old, and she is getting ready to reunite Moses with Moses' own Hebrew family. I love this. And this is risky for Miriam. We don't really know yet. I mean, the Pharaoh's daughter feels sorry, but what if the king's daughter is just as evil as the king? Miriam is putting her life at risk. She is a child advocate who herself is a child. She's really vulnerable to do this. Well, thankfully, verse 8, the king's daughter says, yes, go. So the girl went and got the baby's mother, who was also her mother, right? Pharaoh's daughter said to her, verse 9, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. I love that there's money involved in this passage, because now not only has Miriam reunited Moses with Moses' mom, Moses' mom is getting paid to nurse him, to nurse her own baby. It's about time women got paid for the challenging and, I'm serious, the wonderful work of raising children, that unpaid labor. It's paid here. Here's your precedent right here. And this is a real finger in the eye of Pharaoh. It's like, not only are we going to disobey you, we're going to take your money for it. Love it. Well, today's scene closes with the setup for next time. We won't really think about it much today. But verse 10, when the child grew older, his sister Miriam took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, saying, I drew him out of the water. So there's an adoption, and Moses is safe. And there's much more of the story to come, but a pretty good ending for this one scene. We watch Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus or TV or listen to the radio, all in hopes, I think, that we'll find something that connects to us, something we can latch on to, something that maybe speaks to us, makes us laugh, or that tells us what to do, or that we're not alone. Look at what this character is going through. Like, oh, I thought I was the only one. For example, there is senseless evil in this world, and maybe you've experienced some of it firsthand. So a true crime documentary might be right up your alley. You try to figure out what's going on in the minds of people who do things like this. Or maybe you know the crushing weight of gender stereotypes and the ridiculous expectations our society puts on women. And so you watch the Barbie movie, and it connects. Same thing, I think, with Exodus. We see ourselves in these stories. Out of oppression into the wilderness, out of the wilderness into the promised land. We know that journey. Waiting for God, waiting some more, waiting some more, waiting some more. It's all here. And I think it's helpful as we read these stories. We maybe do this anyway, but it's helpful to see how we can identify with each of the characters. And we always want to identify with the heroes, but maybe we can identify with anyone in a passage. So I want to lead us this afternoon in just a sort of exercise of our imagination. We'll do this briefly, but you could do this on your own with more time, trying to put ourselves in the sandals, I was going to say shoes, but trying to put ourselves in the shoes of each of these characters. We can do this when we read this at home as well, or at a Bible study or a longer conversation with friends. We can ask questions like, what is this person feeling right now? Because this was a real person, we believe, a real historical event. What was it like to actually live through this story? How do they handle this stuff? What would I do in a situation like this? And especially, where did the characters find help? And that all-important question, where is God in this scene? So let's look at the characters. First, there's Moses. Now, I think Moses is a hard one to identify with here because none of us can remember being 3 months old. But a 3-month-old is fully human, totally made in the image of God, completely sentient and capable of feeling and experiencing life, just like you are as an adult. You may not remember it, but you were at 3 months old. So imagine 3 months of loving care, nurture. We don't know what the home life was, but let's say it was good. You have no idea there's a bounty on your head because you're a baby. 3 months of mom and dad and older brother Aaron and older sister Miriam just doting on you, passing you around to grandma and grandpa, taking care of you. They didn't have church back then, but if they did, everyone would be smiling and waving at the baby, feeding you when you're hungry, changing your diaper when you need it. Life is good for baby Moses. And then imagine you are 3 months old and mom swaddles you up and puts you in a basket. Oh, this is great. It's like my nap time now. I'm all warm. And then mom takes you outside and to the banks of the mighty Nile River. You hear the rush of waters. Maybe you get lulled to sleep. Maybe you think you're going out for a picnic. Maybe mom read in the latest parenting book how good it is to make sure your kids get plenty of sunlight. And then splash, you're in the water. Just imagine that for a minute. That feeling of abandonment. Maybe you don't go very far. He's still in the reeds. But mama, where is she? He's got no words for this. And you cry and there's no response. You're hungry, there's no food. You wet yourself. There's no dry clothes anywhere. Like I said, there is an epidemic of child abuse of Hebrew boys in particular in Egypt. And that is not on the mom. That's on Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. But baby is feeling neglected and cries. I don't want to overdo this, but I wonder, does this character, baby Moses, none of you is a baby, but I wonder if this character connects with you at all. Did you have a hard upbringing? Nurture that was missing in the home? Even as an adult, have you felt abandoned by loved ones? Have you felt like you were just tossed into the river with no idea what was going on and no clue if anyone was going to come help you? If that's you, if that resonates with you, you may see yourself in the baby Moses and be all the gladder when he gets pulled out. Or maybe you see yourself as Moses' father. Let's think about him for a minute. We don't get much information about this Amram, just that he's from the tribe of Levi and he married a Levite woman. One Bible dictionary says Amram is a biblical figure without a narrative. He's a man with no story. But every man has a story. Every woman has a story. Every child has a story. We just don't know his. So we can imagine, how must he have felt? And have you ever felt like him? Out of control, subject to forces that you can't change no matter how hard you try. And believe me, they were trying. You ever felt helpless like that? You ever felt like there's this terrible, awful, systemic injustice, something that is killing people, and no one seems to be doing anything about it? Or maybe we're trying, but we can't fix it. That's Moses' dad. Or maybe you connect with Moses' mom. Again, not a whole lot about her here, but look at verse 2. When she saw he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. You can just hear the tenderness in that moment. She saw that he was a fine child, a beautiful child, a special child. The Hebrew word there is good. He was a good child. It's the same word used to describe the creation. God created Adam and Eve, and he looked on them and saw that they were good. She's got that same feeling of God's deep love for that child. This kid is beautiful. This kid is beloved. This kid is going to be something. And yet, he has to die, at least according to Pharaoh. So I wonder, have you ever had to let go of someone who was beautiful to you? Maybe that's a child, maybe a parent, maybe a friend. It's an awful feeling. There's a special bond between father and child, between mother and child, and when that bond is broken in any way, whether by death or emotional separation or conflict, any breaking of that bond, that is immense pain. So there's pain in this passage. What about Miriam? Let's look at her. Verse 4. Could you see yourself in Miriam? It says in verse 4, his sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Now that sounds, at first it sounds like something a sibling would do. They just kind of watch what happens to their brothers and sisters at school and they let it happen. Well, that's not Miriam. She's going to do something. And I wonder, have you ever watched from a distance to see what would happen? Like, I know how this is going to unfold, but I'm just going to let them play it out here. You ever done that? I don't think Miriam is cold or disinterested. She's there for a reason. I think she's eagerly watching, waiting for her time to jump in. Maybe that describes you. You've been on the sidelines. You're watching a story or a situation go step by step. You're ready to jump in whenever you can, but you just don't know if the time is right. You don't know how it will be received. So you're waiting and watching and paying attention and seeing what people will do. And even if they think you're clueless, you're there. You see them. So verse 8, her time comes. Yes, go, said Pharaoh's daughter. So the girl, Miriam, went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take the baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. Victory, at least for now. Maybe you know that taste of victory where you kind of hung back and then your moment came and you stepped in, and with God's help, you acted and something good happened because of you. That's a great feeling. All right, how about Pharaoh's daughter? Can we connect with her? Look again at verse 5. It says, then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket, sent her slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew babies, she said, and then she acts to provide for him. One commentator says brilliantly, this fateful development is spiced with irony. The evil designs of the Pharaoh are unwittingly thwarted by his own daughter. Daughter steps in, and it's payday for mom, too. This is great. So maybe you see yourself in her. Maybe you can call to mind a time that you actually thwarted evil. That's one of our calls as Christians. So hopefully, some point in our lives, we'll get a chance to step in and do that. Maybe not on this big of a scale, but have you ever stepped in and been able to actually stop something bad from happening to someone else? feels amazing to be used like that to help and to protect and to help heal. It's such an honor that God would use us in that way. Well, this story reminds us of times that was us, or how that could be us, working against the status quo to protect and nurture a vulnerable person because God's call is greater than the call of human rulers. So I'd encourage you, and I'm going to do the same, to reflect more on this story after today. See who in this drama speaks to you. See who resonates with you. It might be different even on a different day. Try this on Monday. Maybe it's one person. Tuesday, it could be somebody else. So where are you in this story? Are you Moses? Are you one of the parents? Are you Miriam, his sister? Are you like Pharaoh's daughter? But here's the plot twist, and this is my favorite part of the passage. The main character is not any of these characters that we've just thought about together. The main character is not Moses or Amram or Jochebed or Miriam or the king's daughter. The main character is not even the king who's off screen. He's caused all this. There's another character in the story. One that we probably shouldn't try to imagine ourselves as, and that's God, the Lord. The main character in this story is God, the great rescuer of Israel, who even now is saving his people by pulling Moses up out of the water in an unlikely way. He is named Moses, says Pharaoh's daughter, because I drew him out of the water. That's what she says. And the name Moses in Hebrew sounds like I drew him out of the water. That's in his name. And yes, the king's daughter pulled him out of the water, but God's hands are all over this story. Yahweh will identify himself later as the one who led his whole people out of Egypt. Just like the daughter drew Moses out of the water, Yahweh drew the people out of Egypt and rescued them. And he starts right here by leading Moses out of the waters of death. And our life is the same way. Our own drama, our own story. We play any number of characters as we go through life. And we encounter a lot of other characters. And as we know, some people are real characters. But you are not the main character of your own story. You are not the main character of your story. If you follow Jesus, if you have called on God, the rescuer, to be your rescuer, then God himself is the main character in your drama, in your life. The Lord is the most powerful actor. Jesus is the director and the camera person. Main character in the story of Exodus and in our lives is God himself. And what we especially see about this character, God, here today, is that he can bring life from death. He can bring salvation from a dead end. He can make a way where there is no way. We just sang that. He's a way maker. He can make a mighty warrior out of an at-risk baby, which is what we'll go on to see in Exodus. Recently, I was reading a book about burnout. And it said, God is so good and creative that God can make a universe from dirt and life from a grave. God can make a universe from dirt and life from a grave. And then the author went on to say, what can God do with our pain? He can create out of dirt. If he can bring life out of death, what can he do with our pain? I love that question. And it's a prayer. God, what will you do with my pain? And I would add, God is so good and so creative. He can take a 3-month-old baby who is stuck in the reeds of the Nile River and lead an entire nation out of slavery and into the promised land. That's amazing. Who does that? God. And all this is a sign to us, God's beloved, that we too will one day enter an eternal promised land. If we want to skip ahead all the way to the end of the story. That will be a day where we're rejoicing in God's loving presence forever. And it's going to be awesome. And all of this happens in the midst of genocide, this deliverance, this God at work. And again, if God can do all this, what can God do with our pain? Even here, even in Exodus 2, the Bible's barely gotten going yet. You're just 2 books in. And even here, we see a foretaste of the resurrection of Jesus. Peter would later preach. He was one of the first Christian preachers, and he would preach to a crowd in the book of Acts. He would say, God released Jesus from the horrors of death and raised him back to life because death could not keep him in its grip. Love that line. Death could not keep him in its grip. It's like you're holding on to a rope, and like a rope swing. I've never been good at holding on to rope swings. I broke my finger that way once. I'll tell you the story, maybe never. But it's like you're holding on and you slip, and death can't keep Jesus in its grip. You will die. I will die. We're all going to die. I heard someone say recently that the great lie of advertising is that we can live forever if we just buy the right stuff. You might look for that message in some $14 million a minute commercials this evening if you happen to watch the Super Bowl. I think that's the price I saw, $14 million for a minute. It'll be a subtle message, but death doesn't sell. And many of us don't like to talk about it. But for all of us who follow the risen Jesus, we can talk about death because, in a sense, it doesn't matter because we know that even though we die, we will rise again, just like Jesus. Death will not keep us in its grip. Death could not keep Moses in its grip. Death could not keep Jesus in its grip, and death cannot keep us in its grip. And that means that pain cannot keep you in its grip, not forever. Sin cannot keep you in its grip. And no one can rip you out of Jesus' hands and destroy your soul. That is secure with God. If God can save baby Moses, what can God do with our pain? If Jesus is risen, what can God do with our pain? What will God do with this hurt that I feel right now? How will the Holy Spirit transform it? Because I believe that he will. If Jesus is with me right here, right now, even in my suffering, then I can pray with hope. I can pray with anticipation, and I can say, God, what are you going to do with my pain? I can't wait to see it. Let's pray together.